Welcome back to Berlin Midnight Meows. Last episode, I was talking about being in Japan for a bit, so I thought it definitely deserves one or even two episodes. It was a very special trip, very much because I hadn't been to Asia for quite some years. It's very different when you went back to somewhere you've been to many times, but after a very long break. Already when me and my partner were still there, we were already talking about, oh no, we must come back. It's just, there's so much to do. We cannot do everything this time. You know, I don't like the idea of flying, but to come back to Japan, to Asia, I must fly. And also it's a hell long flight. This time, so with all the waiting time included, it was more than 20 hours altogether. So I was already feeling kind of sad because of this. But anyways, this long separation from Asian culture really made me realize that I forgot many things I used to be doing a lot. Going back to an Asian country after being away for 5-6 years is enough to make me feel that I'm not that purely Asian-minded anymore. I did interact a lot with second-gen immigrants or first-gen immigrants that have already lived in a foreign country for more than, let's say, 10 years. And they all share the same thing, that they have developed this kind of splits between different cultures. And they can't really develop this pure sense of belonging to any single culture. I always knew this exists, I just never feel it so strong. I must say, this time in Tokyo, in short, it was like me being in an East Asian body, but having a little bit of an European lens when I look at many things like happening around me and what I saw in Tokyo. Though I might sound like a weeb, and I am really a weeb, but I don't want to talk about Japan like a regular exotic thing to people because it wasn't my first time there. It was already my fourth time. My partner, he was so excited the whole time before we went there because it was his very first time. And I didn't feel it that much because I was like, come on, it has been so many times. Not saying I know everything in Japan super well. I just didn't expect anything super surprising at this point in time. And I was wrong. I was so fucking overwhelmed. Basically the whole first week. Exactly because I've been there many times and then now coming back after some years realizing, oh, I vaguely remember this. It felt like a punch in my face. Like there were many things I knew, but I forgot. And now I'm like, oh yeah, this is coming back. First day arriving there, I was like, so many things were familiar to me, but at the same time, foreign, really, really foreign. Even for things that I actually grew up with, like, because I mean, Tokyo and Hong Kong, they are very different, but also share a lot of this kind of big Asian city things. I wouldn't even call it just a city. It's more like a metropolis that you can't find anything comparable in Europe, I would say. I can only think of London that gives off similar vibe, but still, it's a Western metropolis. First impression, of course, so many Asians. I was already overwhelmed by this. Because in Berlin, it's very inconvenient to be the minority. But at the same time, I also enjoy this kind of foreigner advantages. Like if you don't follow the rules here, I always have this excuse of, oh, in my culture, it doesn't work like this. Or other people don't even expect me to act like others who grew up here. Probably because of this, apart from the fact that, of course, Berlin is a city of freedom, that's one thing. But the second thing is really that I don't relate to most people so much. So in this sense, you have the space to develop your unique identity. Being surrounded by so many Asians And of course, strongly aware that I'm part of them made me feel like I also have to behave. This feeling hasn't been there for a while. The second thing is this familiar background noises. I know how Berlin smells. It smells shit, by the way. And also this streets noise, I know it. Like if I listen, if you close my eyes, I can totally tell that it's Berlin. Because you hear people talk, right? And it will be German, also a lot of English, and sometimes a bit Polish, just like this mix of European languages. While being in Tokyo, suddenly you have this flashback of this background noise that was a mix of all kinds of Asian languages. And I knew most of them. I don't speak Korean, for example, but I could clearly tell this is Korean, not like if I listen to a European language. If I have never learned that, I probably can't really tell. Yeah, I can max tell Italian, Spanish, but when it comes to Greek, when it comes to Danish, no, I don't know shit. Like I can't even tell what language is this. So suddenly I understand way more, even passively. I don't have to pay attention. Also, so many people were speaking Cantonese already at the airport. So many Hong Kongers love to go to Japan. I'm also part of them, of course. So suddenly, most of the people were speaking the language I understood completely. And some others, like Japanese, I also understand a bit. I wasn't home, but it felt like home. It felt the same as I was in Hong Kong airport. Also, me again realizing I've been learning German for so many years, okay, on and off, and took a lot of breaks. Like one break could be 3 years. But still, I felt almost a bit sad that I do not have this passive comprehension when I was in Berlin. Not as good, at least. If I don't pay attention to German conversation, I wouldn't pick up much information. Not comparable to, for example, Japanese, that I had never learned it officially. But I grew up watching anime, J-drama, Japanese variety shows, completely immersed in this culture. So already without learning, I understood quite a lot of all these conversations happening around me. But I couldn't speak. That's a funny thing. Yeah, I speak more German than Japanese, okay? And then people were so skinny. Crazy. Of course, I always knew Asian people are skinny as fuck. I also got body shame a lot and I wear fucking XS in Berlin, okay? But then going back, surrounded by all these skinny Asian people, I kind of understood how come I felt so overweight back then. Look at all these people from the side. They're like a piece of paper, okay? It's like so thin. I'm like, where's your organs? How can this be possible? Of course, they're also very short. So I was also joking to my partner, like, look, I'm a very tall Asian, apparently. I'm not that tall, but just joking to my partner. Yeah, I'm talking about just the average. I felt like a giant there, for real. Now I don't feel so chubby anymore because now I feel like I have a more objective scale of body shapes and it would be ridiculous to call myself overweight. But I definitely could feel that I'm big to Asian standard. Also, girls being so girl and boys being so boy. In Berlin, it's kind of hard. Like even in Europe, it's not that common for girls wearing this kind of really feminine dresses, one pieces, or like this kind of suits. It's not that common here. Even when people wear suits, it would be this kind of more androgynous cuts. Definitely you find more women wearing pants than skirts or one pieces. I can confidently confirm this because I used to sell vintage clothes here in Berlin, but also in Hong Kong. And I visited a lot of vintage boutiques and shops in different countries. So I definitely observe a lot what people wear and what's the mainstream here and there. definitely there were more girl. They're kind of more reserved, gentle, and polite girl image. That's also another thing, like everyone's presence got smaller, like the average presence of people in Tokyo, even though it's such a vibrant city. And of course, like there are a lot of different people. But if you look at, let's say, the most generic, regular people on the streets, it's not so much about, I want to show myself. I want to be special, which is the case in Berlin, that everyone tries to be special and show who you are, what you like, and you wear. It could be the items, fashion items you wear, could also be how you talk, how you do makeup, and also even the posture and different things. In general, very outgoing. You feel this energy coming out from people a lot. While in Tokyo, people tend to keep their sword in their sheath. And again, that's all something I knew. You know what I mean? I was surprised, but I wasn't surprised as a Western tourist, first time exploring Asian culture. I was surprised in a sense of, oh, I always knew this, but this is more like so old memory that it felt like it's just in my dream or something I read in books, not so firsthand anymore. And suddenly everything is like displaying right in front of me again. Also that people were overall less aggressive in Tokyo. That's such an Asian thing. Even when people are mad or so, they're not gonna show that much. Coming back to the last point, I feel like living in Berlin, I'm so used to people's aggressiveness. That's just how it is. It did kind of help me emotionally that I become maybe a little bit less sensitive to random aggressive people outside on the streets. I just take it as people get aggressive very easily here. So you don't have to do something really bad, or you don't have to be extremely unlucky to bump into an aggressive person. I don't know, should I call this growth? Yeah, being in Tokyo was like, on one hand, I immediately felt this social pressure thing was coming back. Like, I have to behave. I have to be polite to everyone. And I have to watch how I even receive something, how I say thank you, do everything properly. But on the other hand, I also felt this safety. This kind of gates at all the train stations, we also had almost exactly the same in Hong Kong. The design is a bit different, but I suddenly forgot how to use it. I was really standing in front of the gates and waiting for the gates to close. I just totally forgot that, no, you don't have to do this. You just do it like one after one, because who the fuck has this time to wait? Oh my God, how could I forget how to use this? But of course, after the first failure, I knew how to do it afterwards. I was completely confused with the ticket, and I even went on ChatGPT to ask, when do I need this ticket? When do I just use the card? But I actually did this some years ago. I knew how to fucking use this. And the vending machines everywhere. You can even buy hot drinks from vending machines. That is actually something I very much look forward to before I went there. Not even like the big, like the landscape. Of course, that's also great. But Europe also has a lot of great landscape. But vending machines, that's something you cannot find in Berlin. I mean, there are vending machines, but you know how analog they are and how boring the stuff they sell. Not to mention all these ordering machines at restaurants. So it's so perfect for introverts like me. If you really don't want to talk, you can always find something that you just finish ordering without talking to anyone. You can sit alone in the corner and you have a lot of privacy. You just do you in that corner. Also, that seat is completely designed for one person, so everyone would understand you need your privacy. It's not just like you have no friends, even though that might also be true. I kind of miss how friendly Japan is for introverts. Well, I think it's not always the case. Maybe it's also because generally people are under a lot of pressure. That's why people started to have this idea of, we need to create some space for introverts. already 1 month before I went there, I signed up for a few open mics at a Tokyo comedy bar. And I was there for 2 shows. It was super interesting. I really love that. That's also something I like about stand-up comedy. When you travel and go around in different countries, you can always still find this stand-up comedy scene and bring your jokes, your performance there. But on the other hand, you have this chance to experience and observe different kinds of humors coming from a very different culture doing stand-up comedy in Berlin. I believe different cultures, different countries, they have different kinds of humor. So this kind of Germans are so stiff and not funny thing, it works as a joke, but I don't believe so. I also kind of get what kind of humor they like. And it's the same for Japanese humor. People had very different paces. So the shows I went to were both English comedy shows. And at this comedy bar, they have both. They had Japanese comedy, but also English comedy. And I think they were even mainly doing English and then comes Japanese. And that also means there were many Japanese comedians using English to perform the very first time. It was very fun to watch. I watch a lot of Japanese movies, entertainment shows, so I kind of understood a lot of context. For example, they had very different paces and they manipulate their voice that I could totally tell that's from the Japanese side of them, even though many of them said they mainly learn from English stand-ups. To Westerners, they could sound almost awkwardly dramatic, but if you watch anime, you know where this manipulation of voice came from. It could be a loss of translation when they did this in English, but when they switch back to Japanese, it totally makes sense. Japan also has its own comedy culture called Mansai, and that's like a two-people format thing. There's also something similar in China, more like the northeast region. It's called 二人转. It's also a two-people format that one person act like a very smart guy, the other person is more like the dumb guy that's getting mocked all the time. This format has a long history. It's very different from stand-up, but it's, of course, also a kind of comedies. If you don't know this, it will be very awkward when you watch movies and dramas that have this kind of local comedy elements. Something I found super romantic was, even though I could tell these Japanese comedians probably didn't use English on a daily basis, so that's not a completely comfortable language to them, though they were all very fluent. All the Japanese people I met there, they were all super fluent. I felt this passion for comedy in general, that they were very curious, and we also exchanged. I'm like Asian doing comedy only in Germany, and I also talk about like the German English scene, like different things, and they were really curious, and I like how serious people were about their hobbies, because they were just eager to learn. I can tell it's also a lot of courage needed from them to do stand-up in English, especially when many of them already were experienced in Japanese stand-ups. For me, it's really a lot of respect for them. I could totally relate because I had also a very local upbringing, that English was, I only use it because I had to. Just imagine a US American doing stand-up comedy in Mandarin, it's like this impressive. One more super interesting thing was that politically correctness worked totally differently in Tokyo versus in Berlin. Even though I always knew and adapted a lot of my sets to the cultural environment in Tokyo when I performed there. Of course, I wouldn't joke about some super Berlin culture that only Berliners would understand there, right? I was quite surprised when I witnessed that, especially from other comedian sets. For example, like the attitude towards World War II, like that kind of things. Because in Germany, it's super, super correct to do any dark jokes about, Nazi and Germany being the bad guy, and they were indeed the bad guy. So that was completely different in Japan, and I already knew this because I took a Japanese war movies course at university, and I learned about this mainstream narrative of many of this kind of war-related movies. A lot of times because of the atomic bombings, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there's always been this victim perspective. And yeah, of course, it's very controversial outside of Japan, but I know it's still a thing there, that there were quite some comedians talking about World War II, mostly Western comedians, but they usually took this perspective of like Japan taking 2 atomic bombs. No one joked anything about Japan being the bad guy, like not that I heard. I mean, I'm not saying no one thinks so. There are a lot of Japanese celebrities that openly spoke about Japan's responsibilities. Still, just saying, it's way more sensitive. Even very successful people like Miyazaki, the Ghibli god, because he's very famous for this anti-war opinion, he also got into trouble. Many people didn't like what he said about World War II. And at the same time, they didn't really expect something really dirty coming out from a female comedian's mouth. I told some dick jokes there. They were shocked. It took them some seconds. Like there were maybe 2-3 seconds of awkward silence. And then they burst into laughter. Like they didn't expect that from me. I also joke about certain things that just never really worked here because people don't know enough about this. For example, hentai. I watch a lot of hentai. So I also like to talk about how hentai is a more ethical choice of porn because it doesn't involve humans in production. When I did it here, I think many people didn't even know what's hentai. Like, I'm not saying no one, but performing in front of a big crowd, many people, especially older people, wouldn't know what's hentai. While there, when I talk about hentai, of course, everyone knows. When I talk about Asian politics, also no explanation needed. People just know. It was very hard to overlook this ojisan economy thing in Japan. You see so many old people working there because of the aging population, and also the pension system is not as great. And there are a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into this. Okay, ojisan economy, it's not an official term, okay? I made this up basically because I saw a lot of ojisan, which means uncle, everywhere at the shops, some as shop owners, some are still working. Like for example, the parking tickets. 2 ojisan, like they're very small, they're like shorter than me, going around as 2 to check all the cars parked along the way. Me and my partner were thinking, what if people are aggressive to them? How can these 2 dudes handle like any dangerous situation? Because I mean, you give people a ticket, they must be angry, right? We had a lot of questions in our head. Our first Airbnb located in a neighborhood called Tabata. It's kind of central, but at the same time, really local. It's like a residential area. We almost didn't bump into any tourists. We're just strolling around our Airbnb on the first day because it was kind of late and we were super exhausted. So we just wanted to have dinner somewhere nearby, not going too far. We were really checking the restaurants nearby and see which one doesn't need a reservation. And then we saw in a hidden corner, very much, there was a traditional sushi restaurant. And then there was a old guy in his chef outfit walking around outside, checking if there's any customer. This kind of cliche, a bit sad, disappointed, old man face, exactly like what you see in J-drama. This kind of middle-aged, old Japanese men that don't show that much when they're sad and they really press it in. That's exactly how he looked. It's our very first meal. Like I was still super overwhelmed by everything and probably only got some 5-6 hours sleep in the last 48 hours. So we were like, actually, that would be convenient. But I was like, I don't know. Should we actually go check the Google reviews? I'm not good at checking the menu. And when the waiter comes to you, you're like, oh, we're just looking and leave. He was like, it's just one meal. That's just YOLO. So we went in. It was like entering a 90s J-drama. Everything is like old and untouched, but not new. Things weren't used for a long time. I already regret a little bit, but let's just do it. We were the only customer and likely the only customers on that whole day. His wife came to us and tried to serve us. They both only spoke Japanese, not even numbers in English. I tried to communicate with them in my broken Japanese, but I understood almost everything they said. You know, it's a family restaurant run by old people. How traditional the menu look. With Google Translate's help, we managed to order something, and then the old lady gave us 2 wet towels. That's a very Japanese thing that they give you to clean your hands a little bit. It smells so bad. It had some stains on it. There's yellow stains. I don't know what is it from. But because I wanted to be polite, as I said, I didn't complain. We already sat down, so everything was too late anyway. So I just touched a little bit my fingertips and then I didn't touch it again. The old man got our order and started preparing the fish. If you know how sushi restaurants work, they don't only unfreeze the fish when they get the order. Apparently, they probably hadn't had any customers for a long time. So he only took out the frozen fish from the freezer at that moment. I could see how he's trying to cut the fish when it's completely hard. And of course, it's very hard to cut through. So, you know, like this kind of like stone sound when he tried to hit it on the chopping board. I was so worried. I was so tense, basically, because I was like, oh God. I also had a chance to look at the old lady very closely. And I noticed she had probably some eye issues. So I was like, maybe she just couldn't see and smell. You know, that's very common with old people. I didn't want to blame it on them because it looked like they were really trying to serve us. The old man also pushed his wife to serve us in the kitchen, like how he talked to her, I overheard. Then she also told him like, can't do much. And this whole vibe, it's just like a live economic recession in front of me because it's so vivid. That's what I saw exactly in some J-drama, especially after 90s, trying to portray smaller family businesses having a very difficult time since then, and many never managed to recover. They maybe also have children, but they're not helping because there's no future with this restaurant. But then because they have a lot of feelings towards their business, even though it's not making money, it's very hard for many people to let go and just close it. Maybe I'm just like over exaggerating how it is, but this whole thing and all these furniture looking like they are from 90s gave me a very weird feeling. I was even thinking, oh my God, food poisoning or what? But I was like, it's probably fine. But we also didn't eat that much because of that. I was like, are you even making money? They also try very hard to serve us and also even trying to talk to me and then ask me, where am I from? That kind of things. They try very hard to have a conversation and help us with everything we didn't understand, also telling us how to drink the tea. It just didn't feel like they didn't give a fuck. I just felt a bit sad after that restaurant. I'm very empathetic. Imagine this, like you have a restaurant and that's the only customers you get this whole day. It's kind of cliche to say Japan is very clean, right? I like to take another perspective. A lot of times people like to say they have very good hygiene. In fact, I think it was more like a lot of maintenance and organization. When I used the toilets, a lot of times I saw this kind of cleaning schedule sticking on the wall that they have someone checking if it's clean every half hour. When people, especially white tourists, when they go to Asian countries, they like to talk about how new and how advanced everything is. I just find this kind of ignorance when they say it from this perspective of, I never expected this. Well, like you should touch some grass maybe, because Europe is not as advanced technologically speaking as you think. But at the same time, when we say something is new and advanced, there is a difference between something that's simply newly built and something that was built a long time ago and still kept super new. And that's something I think in Berlin that people haven't managed to maintain, basically. And that's why many things look old, but I wouldn't call Berlin a developing city. No, it's not. But it's just old and lack of maintenance. For example, there's this private railway line in Tokyo called Keio Line. There's also this sister line thing called Keio New Line. And I was curious, like, why is it new? And the color and like logo, it's basically the same. So out of curiosity, I Googled and found the Keio New Line was open in 1978. And the Keio line, the original one, that is the old one, so-called, it was opened in the 1913. That's like 100 years ago. Can you imagine? And like how everything is so well kept. Like you can tell it's not that new anymore, but I'm just impressed by how things are so well maintained. This is also a challenge many European cities are facing, right? They had a lot of technology already a long time ago, and exactly because they were very advanced, that's why they look so old now. To keep everything in shape costs a lot of money and time. That's, I think, what's truly impressive about Japan. I think new technology, AI, this is not so rare nowadays, right? You go to China, there are like bunch of newest technology that will scare the shit out of you, especially people that go there the first time, they will be like, because they still think China is like in the 60s. I'm like, wake the fuck up for real. A lot of times because Asian countries in general are more efficient in pushing new things through. That's also why they can build so many new things at once. Let's see how everything goes in 30 years. We took the metro a lot, so I was always watching this train TV showing different kinds of weird stuff. They had a few informative columns that they show a little bit information they collected. One was about work culture in Europe versus in Japan. They were talking about how in Europe, many companies first discover their needs and then they decide how many people they hire and what kind of people they hire. Versus in Japan, many companies tend to first hire people and then think about the task or responsibilities the new joiners could take. The conclusion is more like, oh, we should learn more from other countries and be more efficient and better. I just find this super refreshing, this learning attitude. Taking a step back, I remember that's also very common in Hong Kong. Of course, the grass is always greener on the other side, but a lot of times, I think it's very common for Asian countries to talk about something they could learn. And I think this learning attitude is quite lacking in the West, actually. At least they might learn from each other, more like European countries learning from other European countries, but not so much looking outside of Europe. People like to talk about, of course, like food, the aesthetic, it's so cool, but they just find it very exotic. People do appreciate a lot, but not so much this, oh, we can also learn from them and improve ourselves, this narrative. In Tokyo, they always show you this language sheets when they don't speak English and you don't speak good Japanese, then they just show you the instructions in different languages on a piece of paper. And a lot of times, the second language would be Chinese, would be Korean. A friend of mine also visited Japan recently, and it was her very first time visiting Asia. And for her, that was a shock, a legit shock. Usually, when you don't speak German, you can kind of expect people to speak English. It's just like another world, another world like you flip around. About this language sheets, how thoughtful is this? It's a very simple way to break the language barrier, right? And then thinking of the time when I arrived in Germany, how many people could speak English, but they didn't want to, and they give you this shit face, they roll their eyes. That's so unnecessary. Why can't they just integrate this? When we came back at Helsinki airport, by chance there were a bunch of Korean tourists arriving with us, and they were like ajuma, like they were like middle-aged people that didn't speak any English. And we were just going through the security check. They literally got yelled at by all these staff there. They spoke English like, look, I'm doing that much for you and you still don't understand. They really took it like, what the fuck? You don't even speak English. All these old people were just confused as fuck. Their stuff also got thrown around, didn't really follow the instructions because they didn't understand. And I was like, it's a very international airport, okay? They also had a lot of flights coming from Asian countries where you don't really expect the old people to speak English. So they should all have experience dealing with the situation. I even saw like a young dude basically lecturing the grandma, like telling her, you have to take the liquid out. Next time, don't do it. And that was already like, after the check was done, he still wanted to lecture her in English. About the fashion scene there, you see a lot of people wearing the same outfit from Uniqlo or like this kind of business suits in office areas. But at the same time, you also find the most expressive people. It was very refreshing to see how people style their clothes. They were very good at layering, like this kind of t-shirt on Lolita style dresses, a lot of men wearing dresses and on platform shoes. You can find the most tamed fashion there, but also all kinds of over-the-top, edgy styles. Almost everyone on the streets, everyone had a luxury brand handbag. It's probably also part of the so-called pressure that you need to buy this kind of bags. Otherwise, you're gonna stick out somehow for having a very cheap bag. We also visited a lot of thrift stores. For my partner, it's more about secondhand cameras. Well, for me, just all kinds of stuff like clothing, watches. I don't buy them. I just like checking them out. I would say this is a must-do in Tokyo. Speaking of my experience going to so many different vintage shops in different countries, here's the thing about the secondhand shops in Tokyo. They are always very well organized and people know what they're selling. This is surprisingly not universal. Some shop owners, they are really just doing this for business and maybe sometimes also for fun. Not many of them are super knowledgeable about the items they are selling, from what time it is, the brands, the history of the items. It's of course also good for buyers because if you are knowledgeable, then you can often find something that is actually very valuable, but then apparently the shop owner doesn't see the worth and then you can buy for a cheaper price. In Japan, it's very rarely the case. They did very thorough research. Every t-shirt has the time on it, like from which decade, also sorted very well by the style or the colors, the brands. They really sort everything super meticulously. And same for the cameras, everything is in super good condition. So yeah, according to my partner, there was not so much chance for buying something actually worth a lot for a very cheap price. That wasn't very much the case because they're just too professional. They know shit. The vintage shop people also try very hard to sell and introduce their stuff to me because I probably looked so much like a potential customer, and I was kind of generous there too. Like I was just so like mentally ready to buy stuff. I could also tell they were like observing me and trying to recommend something I would like. I'm just moved by people's love for certain things. Like when they love fashion, when they love cameras, when they love hats, when they love leather shoes, when they love something and became an expert. I also put on some of my best outfits, probably also brought us a little bit biased experience because everyone was super nice to us. Many people came to us and told us, "Oh, you two look so cool. I love your hats. I love your style." But though I get this a lot in Berlin, it's another thing when you get this in Japan because usually people are more reserved. I had a lot of good experiences that I don't know if it's a good reference. I definitely think there's a lot of lookism in Tokyo and also in Seoul, like this kind of big Asian cities. People judge you a lot based on your look and what you wear. There was another moment I was kind of in between Eastern and Western worlds, but not really fitting in perfectly anywhere. And that was when I tried to buy bras in Tokyo. I couldn't find my size. I was already looking at the biggest size. This is actually already like 2 sizes bigger than what I usually get in Berlin. And that's like this kind of fancy underwear stores. The people try to give you a lot of services, follow you to the fitting room, and then also wait for you outside like this. So I was already kind of sweating, feeling all these pressure. I tried to buckle up and I was like, shit, I can't. It's so fucking tight. Oh my God. I already got the biggest one just to be safe. The good thing is I would say I had enough confidence to not feel body shame by this fucking small as fuck bras. Because in Europe, it's usually that they don't have my size because I'm too small. When I talked about this, my friends in Berlin wouldn't believe me. They would be like, "Oh, you're so small. Please just don't say again that you're chubby. Don't even joke about this." And I'm like, "No, I don't say this to brag or what." To be honest, I'm also not that sensitive about body sizes anymore, like in the past. When people are bigger, smaller, I don't feel so much anymore. I'm glad that I didn't feel attacked. I just found this more hilarious. That also made me realize I changed a lot. That moment that I couldn't close the bras was very nostalgic because, some years before, that was my everyday life. I couldn't close the pants. I couldn't fit into certain things. That was like the daily life and always feeling bad about this because it was so hard to find something that suits me. And also when I was younger, I didn't have an idea of what would suit me more. So I was just like going around trying on different things without any directions. And of course, I got very frustrated because every time was like a no. Like I always got rejected by the piece of clothing. It was a traumatizing experience to try on something in the fitting room and coming out telling the shop assistants, no, it was too small for me. To now, I know way more. It's also experience and knowledge. It's not so much about how my shape and my weight changed. That was a moment I was like, I became stronger mentally. I don't get frustrated so easily because of this kind of inconvenience. The whole time in city center Tokyo, we actually didn't see that many Western tourists. It was mostly Asian tourists. And we had a few day trips. One to this very famous hot spring town, I guess, called Hakone. After we took the train there, we got on the shuttle bus and then we heard German everywhere. It was a whole bus of German-speaking tourists. We could tell some were German, some were Swiss. Makes sense because I think skyscrapers and city are not so much Western tourist style, I would say, usually. Unless you're very much into Japanese culture, you probably like city center a lot. We also managed to find a tattoo-friendly hot spring and had the full Zen experience there. It was so good because I also went to the sauna in Germany. It really allows you to let go your stress a bit. It's just very different because it's more indoor and not so much blend into the nature, not so much that. Me and my partner just went separately to the man parts and the woman area. Afterwards, we just exchanged what we saw. It was so funny. In the women area, I feel like people were quite relaxed. Not so many people were acting awkwardly, even though for some of them that might be the first time they get naked in front of strangers. Because you can't wear anything when you go into the hot spring area. I guess there were also quite some Germans that were pretty used to this. There were also women who came together with their friends, like middle-aged women, and chit-chatted very quietly. When you are in your middle age, you have a friend going on a hot spring trip with you, talk about their children. I just find this middle-aged people friendship very romantic. And there were also a family, the granddaughter, the mom, and the grandma, they came together. And it was the girl's first time coming to a hot spring, so they were explaining stuff to her. She was like, kid, but not this kind of girly type of girl. That's probably before they got socialized into that kind of well-behaved girls. Yeah, so she was like running around, being a bit naughty, also very curious about everything. And then the grandma and the mom also tried to explain everything to her. I also found this kind of cute together, even though I'm not a kid person. That picture was just very peaceful to me, and I enjoyed that vibe that we just doing our thing. While on the man side, my partner said there were so many men that were acting super awkward and making this kind of old man sound, but no one talked. Everyone was like, I'm a loner here. So that was a very nice experience. This is roughly it for my long-awaited Japan trip. Of course, I didn't include every single detail, even though I had a long list of every single thing that happened, like even super, super tiny moments that I thought, actually that's quite interesting. But then after my recording session of 3 hours, I became so tired. I was like, okay, it was nice, but then spending so much time just talking about one single trip also made me feel, I don't know, just a bit creepy or a bit killing the joy. So there were some moments that I just left them to myself. I think it's totally fine. So maybe I already overdid it. And actually, there are some thought that I think it's not that much about a trip, but very much a life stage thing that I saw certain things and then it reminded me of certain things I did long time, like 15 years ago. And I've decided to pretty much gather all of them and make another episode more about the nostalgia, not so much just about going to Japan, even though it was a lot about Japanese culture that I enjoy and that pretty much accompanied me as a teenager. But I'm gonna talk about them in the next episode. Also, so that I can just cut this together and release without waiting for another month. I find it so ridiculous that at the beginning, I really thought I could do weekly updates. That was not a realistic promise, even though I low key already could foresee something like this, more like a monthly or even bi-monthly update. I'm a person that like to promise something big and still try to hit that goal while feeling super stressed. But I still do this all the time. Every time when I can't keep a promise, I feel super, super bad as well. Just having this big dream in front of me makes me feel good. Instead of promising something super realistic, but also just not fun. It's too realistic, you know? It's like you promising your boss, I'm gonna come to work tomorrow. Like, what is this promise? Do you even have to promise this? Right? Like, if you set a goal, it has to be a little bit challenging, right? Anyways, that's all of this episode. I feel like I talked a lot, but actually I didn't really say that much. Yeah, it's just me murmuring about everything I felt during my Japan trip. It's okay. I hope you have a nice evening. Bye for now.